No problem. So yeah, as Alex mentioned, I'm search director at Techmark and an SEO by background, and it's probably for that reason that I still give a crap about links. I know they're a bit of a dirty word in some corners. And yeah, I'm aware it's 2015, and I anticipate that I'll still give a crap about links this time next year as well, and probably the next year after as well. And I think if we're being honest, the reason that there's now so many content marketing agencies is because, not because SEOs feel like they want to really get into content, just because all of a sudden we love the idea of big shiny pieces of content. I think it's because we just have to adapt, because that's how we acquire links now, and that's still a phenomenal part of how we're actually going to get SEO results.
Tomorrow or Thursday will be fine.
So we invest really, really heavily in content, and the primary goal is link building for us, to be honest. Like in most cases, do some social content, some digital PR content, but predominantly our goal is link acquisition. And some of the stuff we do, this is a survey from last year, what looks like a 245-word blog post with a stock image, nothing shiny about it, not a big infographic, not a huge interactive. We commissioned a smartphone user survey asking 2,000 smartphone owners about their usage habits, ran with one of a number of headlines we had the option of, and that 245-word blog post to date has delivered links from 190 referring domains, and that number's going up all the time. It still garners links in the background, and I'll talk a little bit about how later. And they're not just, you know, the kind of crap links we could have bought years ago. TechCrunch, BBC, Guardian, Yahoo News, ITV, Mail Online, really big links that we went out to win. On a bit of a smaller scale, things like what I would probably call instructor graphics, just quick how-tos in a visual context. How to beat jet lag, not an original idea. It's been done before. I'm not claiming to have been the first person to have done it, but reformatting ideas, reformatting content to fit a target audience. We deliberately went after 2 or 3 sites in particular, actually, and ended up with links on about 20, 30 websites, 4 of which were the core target ones that we were going for, just by reformatting and making sure that we had a good linkable asset. And again, I'll talk about that shortly. We've not always had particularly great success with content. We were absolutely crap at this 5 years ago. We were doing infographics that just were so awful it's embarrassing to look back on, and they weren't doing the job at all. So we've made some phenomenal changes to improve things over 5 years. We've got better at goal setting, first of all. We're now much more efficient with coming up with ideas. There's a link there, the slides we've made available later. And there's a link there to a methodology called 635 brainwriting that I'm a phenomenal fan of. And actually, on the Techmark website, there's a free tool to do this online now. We've got better at analysing our audiences. So again, there's a link there to 7 tools in particular that I use to actually look at not just what our audiences are searching in Google, but where they're reading, what they're doing. And again, I'll talk about this shortly. We've invested more in production, design, development, copywriting, research, things like that. But I guess the biggest area for us and the biggest investment has been into smarter promotion. So planning promotion better and executing it a lot better. And I'm talking about time and money there as well. You know, not just throwing a lot of money at it. It's been resource and cash. But before we get into promotion, I just want to take a little bit of a step back. What I'm talking about here is promotion not for social shares, not for traffic, not for fluffy digital love. I'm talking for about out-and-out links here, which means that what we need to understand is the motivation that people have for linking to a piece of content rather than just sharing it. In 2009, the reason is because I paid them, and it was pretty easy, to be honest. We could rent links, we could buy links. It worked. We had some phenomenal, massive 2008, 2009 number ones that were absolutely 100% completely supported by paid links. Nowadays, a bit more complicated. It's because we spent so many hours creating a linkable asset and then promoting it, which is far less catchy, and it sounds like a lot harder work, and it is, but there is a bit of good news. The reasons that people link to content are far simpler than the reasons they share on social. They're a lot less human, to be honest. There was a study a while back released by the New York Times about why people share and sort of psychology behind that. And the summary of it is that it's all about relationships, which sounds incredibly complicated to me. But the 5 core reasons they talked about throughout this study is bringing valuable, entertaining content to others, defining ourselves to others, growing, nourishing relationships, self-fulfillment, and to get the word out about causes or brands. Now, it can be quite complex psychological stuff, all that. I'm probably not the world's best to talk about content for self-fulfillment or for defining ourselves to others. It's all a bit deep for me. Then this came out, and this was just a couple of months ago. BuzzSumo and Moz, a research report on content shares and links, and they analysed 1 million posts. Now, with any report like this, you always take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt, because what does that sample look like? Where's the sample come from? The methodology is all detailed, but you always take it with a little bit of pinch of salt. A few facts really stuck out for me, and that was these. New research content and serious opinion-forming journalism achieves higher shares and links. 75% of randomly selected articles had 0 external links, so most have none. And again, 75 actually seems quite low to me. I think when you look at, even if you pull out the BBC website and things like that, there's quite a proportion of pages that don't necessarily get inbound links. If you pull out pages from big brand sites that are invested in content, I'd hazard a guess that it's probably more than 3/4 of pages that aren't linked to. The one fact that really stuck out for me though was this one: no correlation of shares and links. And it's not impossible to get both on a single piece of content. We've done it, I'm sure a number of you guys have done it. It's not impossible, but the motivators behind why people share and why people link are often very different. Sharing is all about relationships, sounds incredibly complicated. Natural linking, certainly in my experience, is more about attribution or blame. So someone giving you credit for something or someone blaming you for something that they've said. That's why some of the quite controversial stuff works fairly well. It's for that reason, the attribution thing, the image link building still works really well. And obviously I've not got the time really today to go into in depth the process that we're using for image link building, but we are using it in pretty much every single sector. And we're getting links like this from it. So gov.uk, link it out with an image that they've used that we took from the window of the 15th floor Techmark office. Vice, using a picture of our clients. We're using it in insurance, we're using it in B2B, we're using it in finance, retail, and building big links off it. 30, 40, 50 decent quality links a year. And that's simply because if people use something that belongs to you, they attribute. Now with image link building, it's not always been that straightforward, I guess. A lot of strategy needs to go into it. You've got something like a 60-step process in place for this now that's been fine-tuned over a couple of years. But ultimately, you set the right strategy. So you decide what kind of images you're going to produce and put out there. What do people need that's relevant for what it is that you're trying to get them to say about you? A good strategy, a lot of time into optimizing the images and making sure people find them. And then, I'd say the vast majority of cases, people don't link by default. They'll either link to Flickr if you're hosting on Flickr, or they won't link at all. So you need a good piece of kit to notify you when people are using the images so that you can go and, I guess, outreach the people who are using them and they're not linking. But it's a good in. It's a, hey, thanks for using this thing of mine. Would you mind linking? And, it's a really easy win because they've used something of yours, so they attribute. Pretty straightforward stuff. But how does that apply to content promotion? So what I think it does is raises the question about why someone would link rather than share a piece of content that we're promoting. And that all comes down to linkable assets. So anyone who's been involved in doing any kind of outreach to journalists in particular probably encountered a situation where you get something covered and they mention you and they don't link. And then you go and chase a link and you can't get a link. And it's frustrating. So there's a few different ways around. Obviously, sometimes it's just a relationship with the person who's covering your story. Other times it's about making sure that there's a linkable asset to go with your story. So a linkable asset could be images they can use. That might be an infographic, or it might be a bank of images that you produce specifically for that purpose, specifically for journalists and bloggers to use. It might be a tool that solves the problem that you're talking about, the problem that your story is actually about. It might be a download that the blogger or journalist audience will benefit from. That was the case for us with that TechMark survey. We left a download to a spreadsheet with the raw data for anyone that wanted more information. Or your asset, your linkable asset, could be a pretty controversial opinion or statistic that someone would rather link to you to take the blame for than take the blame themselves. A really, really clever take on this that Lexi Mills from Dynamo PR talked about at the Turing Festival back in August. What they did for one of their clients is they surveyed 1,000 British single people about whether or not they have friends with benefits arrangements. And I think it was something like a third, I forget the actual number, of people admitted to, yeah, they have this friends with benefits arrangement. Lexi's smart, she's in PR, she knows that the story will get picked up. She also knows that she might not get the links that she needs. So what they did is they created a linkable asset around this. They went off and created on their client's website a tool that was very, very, very simple, friends with benefits contract generator. Just put 2 names in and you get this PDF that's your friends with benefits contract. Really clever stuff, ties in with the story really well, and now all of a sudden the journalists who are writing about the headline figure have got a linkable asset and a reason to link back to that site. So ultimately it's just anything that justifies a link rather than a mention. So back to promotion. Let's assume we've got our story, we've got the compelling reason that someone needs to link rather than just share. Then it's all about promoting the content. And I guess the first thing to point out there for me is that outreach and promotion are not the same thing at all. For me, outreach is one promotion tactic, one of a number of promotion tactics, to be honest. And I would argue that if outreach is the only thing you're doing to promote your content, then you're not really doing enough. And the reason I say that is because it's really bloody hard and it's really tough to scale. And there's now so much content out there that the longevity of being able to just ride off the back of piling emails out in the hope that you get something back, you know, the days are numbered for that sort of tactic, I think. Most of us who've emailed journalists and bloggers will have had the frustrating scenario of either not getting a response, or in the case of bloggers, just getting a rate card response. Who can blame them? You know, they were getting paid by SEOs for next to nothing for the longest time. So I reiterate that outreach isn't promotion for me. I'm going to talk about outreach because it's still effective, but I also want to talk later about some of the other tactics that you can use as well to make it a bit more scalable. So before you can plan promotion, you need to know why you're doing it. What does success actually look like in this particular area? Now, it could be links, obviously, which is predominantly what we're talking about today. But then you need to know what kind of links, how many links, where are they coming from, target publications, things like that. Have a real picture of exactly what it is you're setting out to achieve. I think that we've probably all been guilty in the past of just having a piece of content that we believe so badly in that we've maybe sort of skipped some of the thorough planning about where these links are coming from, and you get to a point where it's finished and you just start doing outreach in a way that is just emailing people, hopefully. You need to know who you're doing it for. Now, when your goals center around link acquisition, your content's target audience might not be the same as your target customer. And what I mean by that is, let's say you are a company who is selling products or holidays or whatever to the over 60s. If you're selling to the over 60s, my nan is your target customer. You ask my nan to link to you and she's going to pull that face. She ain't got a clue what you're talking about. And obviously what we need to be doing is aligning our objectives with the real audience, the linking audience, as well as the end user. So we start off with figuring out where this audience is, where they're finding content and what they're reading. YouGov profiles, free tool if you use a light version. The paid version is pretty good as well though. What this lets you do is it lets you look at your end customer. So let's say your customers people who enjoy gardening. You put that in there, you get some demographic data, you get a load of other information like that. And then you start getting information like this: watches TV for 21 hours a week, online for 1 to 5 hours. And here's the kind of bit that we're using the most here: newspapers read and magazines read. Because then your target audience for link acquisition starts to become journalists at Gardener's World, journalists at Daily Mail, the people who are writing to your customer. You can go and get a bit more data through YouGov Profiler. You can go in and get a full list actually of websites and how these magazines and how much correlation there is between your target audience in comparison with the general public, about how likely they are to read these. No surprise that people with interest in Guardian are far more likely to read Gardener's World than non-gardeners are. No massive surprises there. Newspapers, again, the same sort of thing. You can start looking at the correlation. People who like gardening, less likely to read The Scotsman or The Herald than the general public. Facebook Audience Insights. It's an advertising tool. You don't have to buy advertising to use the tool. Really, really, really good tool, actually. So you just put something in. It could be something that someone likes, like gardening as an interest, or it could be people who like one of your competitors' brands or something like that. And you put all this information together about them. You get things like other pages they like, you get interests, you get age. Then you get, within the other pages they like, media. So then you start to be able to see the kind of things that these people are reading. Woman's Own, Best Magazine, Chat Magazine, Pick Me Up Magazine, and again the affinity. So how much likelier people within this audience segment are to read this particular publication or to like it on Facebook than the general public. So what we're starting to build is a list of the publications in which we need to get links that are so relevant for us to have these links. Google Display Planner is another pretty good tool for this. Again, it's designed for selling advertising, of course, like everything Google ever releases, but it can be used for starting to build a list of target publications for your content too. You put a topic in this case gardening or landscaping, and you can get a list of placements. So what these are is basically websites that Google's suggesting you can put your ads on. I look at it as websites that Google is suggesting that people who are interested in gardening go to. So these are sites that I want to get some editorial placed on, or who I want covering my content in some cases. What I would say with the lists that you take from Google Display Planner is to do some manual sanity checking. So go through the sites, have a proper look at them from a quality perspective, because I think that it can be a little bit hit and miss with the sort of AdSense users. Then we start looking for specific contacts within these publications or sites. These are some of the tools that you can use just to find contacts, to start finding journalists, to start finding relevant bloggers, and to start getting names. There's a ton of those tools there. I've got a product hunt collection with some of them in. And again, I'm happy to write up a full list later on. At this point, what you've got is a massive list, potentially, of just names and publications. And looking at something like that can be a little bit intimidating. So I tend to organise into tiers as a personal preference. I've just found it a bit more efficient to work this way. Major, midweight, and smaller influencers, effectively. I split into 3 for the vast majority of campaigns. How they split and what falls where depends very much on the campaign. For example, the TechMark survey, we had national press and key technology press in tier 1. We had regional press in tier 2, and we had the smaller technology blogs in tier 3. As a rule, I would look at your tier 1, your major influencers, as people who, even if only 1 or 2 of them covered your story and linked to you, that would look like a success, that they have a big enough audience that it could lead to other links, it could lead to other benefits. With tier 2, I'd be looking at that as people who you might need a dozen or so to actually link to your story for it to start looking like a success. And with the tier 3 stuff, well, those are the publications where they're highly relevant, but their audiences are small, and in reality, you're probably looking at, 30, 40 before that starts to look like a success. Again, that's a loose rule, really. And you want to get buy-in early. You want to get buy-in before the content's produced, at least with tier 1. So before we start producing anything, we'll get in touch with tier 1 contacts. Now, I've historically been a bit of a cynic when it comes to sort of psychology and marketing. And then a couple of years ago, I read this book, Influence by Cialdini. And it's basically a Bible for getting your own way with everything. It's absolutely amazing. And what he does is Cialdini lists several principles of influence, the things that make us say yes. And one of them is commitment and consistency. And it's this idea that essentially, as humans, it's not desirable to be seen as inconsistent. So if we say that we believe in something, that we're all for a cause, typically we'll commit to that and we'll be pretty consistent in that throughout. We can use this, and we did use this with our TechMark survey. We were getting in touch with tier 1 contacts who'd written about, like one of them, for example, had written an opinion piece about people who were sticking their faces in their phones in the pub. Getting in touch with them, just saying things like this: I saw you wrote about people with their faces in the phones in the pub. So you're making it clear there that you know they believe in this already. That makes them a bit more likely to respond positively to the next bit. If I had data suggesting people spend X amount of hours per day on their phone, would it be of interest? Overwhelmingly, people will say yes in that scenario. You point out something that makes you realise that they should care, you're going to get, yeah, that's of interest to me, at least, certainly provisionally. Then we move on to one of the other principles here, reciprocity. And this is the idea that we do favours for humans. So even if someone does something for you, without you asking, completely unsolicited, as a human, you'll feel inclined to sort of return the favour. So one way we can take advantage of that is kind of the way that we did it with the survey. Great, well, we're conducting research at our own expense. We're going out, we're buying all these survey responses. Are there any other questions that we could ask at our expense? Is there any data that's going to help you specifically? And actually, there were only 3 or 4 individual questions, or questions that were different enough to be individual, that came back. Yeah, actually, it'd be great if you could ask this. So the cost was negligible for us to go off and for a dozen or so journalists add an extra question into that particular survey. When you go back then with that data later on, it takes a real arsehole, doesn't it, to say, no thanks, I'm not really interested, when they're already aware that you've done them a favour at your expense to get some data that they said would be of interest. So you've pretty much got a much, much higher chance of getting some coverage as long as the data's come back reasonably as you're expecting it to. From there, we're looking at messaging and headlines. And unfortunately, as humans, we don't really pay a great deal of attention to the detail in content. We scan read online. We read headlines, we read subheadings, and anyone who's used Twitter will absolutely be able to attest to the fact that people share absolute crap. So, unfortunately, how well you describe your content is actually as important as how good the content is, maybe even more important in some cases. So what I'm saying is people on the internet don't read shit properly before they share it. Now let's take a lesson from clickbait headlines. We're not going for shares here, but what we need to do is we need to get the people that we're reaching out to go to our content. And in some ways, we have to take a little bit of a lesson from clickbait headlines here. Not quite to this extreme. I don't know if you saw this particular piece of content. A young man asks a homeless man to borrow his bucket. What happens next will burst you into tears. Now, I'm going to save you all the effort of going watching that video, because I watched that video, and I can tell you exactly what happened. In a somewhat staged-looking scenario, some guys sit down next to a homeless guy. One of them starts drumming on his bucket, then some other people turn up with a guitar and stuff, and they sing the song, and then passers-by put money out to this guy, and the buskers give the money to the homeless guy, and they walk off, and nobody gets bursted into tears. It is a crap video, I've got to be honest. But 1.7 million people like this on Facebook, and I checked, it isn't even one of those where you have to like it to see it. People are voluntarily interacting with this piece of content on Facebook. 1.7 million people don't give a crap that the headline doesn't make sense and that the video is a pile of staged crap. So, yes, you need a cracking headline. You really do. A really good headline will probably get you clicks on your email, will probably get people at least reading what you've got to say, at least looking at the content in question. But you have to deliver on it. The headline will generate the interest, but it's the content itself and you delivering on the content that will generate a link that will get the next positive interaction. So test your headlines, your email subjects, your tweets. Massive fan of Simitator. What Simitator does is it lets you generate a fake tweet effectively. With any username, with any picture, here's what the tweet will look like. And then with consumer surveys, you can basically do something like this. Which of the following tweets would you be most likely to click the link on? And you can start split testing headlines. Now, even if your goal is link building, using this sort of Twitter visual is a valid test for a headline. Because with your headline, what you're going for is just getting the volume to the site, is just getting people to open the email, to read what you have to say, to at least go and look at the content in the first place. So split testing, things like this with Google consumer surveys is really cost effective. 500 people, $50 or so. So when you've spent quite a lot of money on a piece of content, just sanity checking your headline is pretty cost effective. MailChimp, let you split test email. If you're sending out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of outreach emails, just from your everyday email account, you're not building up any real knowledge or data that's easy to access about headlines, about subject headings. If you use MailChimp, you can look at open rates and you can start split testing email. Anyone who's sending hundreds out, you've got a massive bank of data there at your fingertips if you use a tool like that. Split test your email, start gathering data, and work out what kind of headlines, what kind of subject lines are getting the opens. A few books at the risk of sounding like I'm setting a homework assignment. Contagious, Jonah Berger. PR Masterclass, Alex Singleton. Made to Stick, Chip and Dan Heath. And Selling Your Story in 60 Seconds. Now, Selling Your Story in 60 Seconds is not made for content marketers or marketers at all. It's made for budding screenplay writers and novelists who want to get their pitch read in the sort of industry that they're in. You basically get to pitch something to an editor and you're trying to get them then to read the whole thing. So the 60-second pitch is incredibly important in that particular industry. And there's a lot of likenesses there with what it is that we need to do as content marketers as well. So, reaching the right people at scale. You may remember that I said this. Outreach is not the same as promotion. And yet I've probably just spent the last 10 minutes banging on about outreach. So let's talk about scaling this now. Paid press release distribution. I'm not talking about the market wire and PR news wires that we used to do in 2009 where you put out some crappy piece of news that isn't even news at all and all you want them to do is syndicate it to the 1,000, 2,000 sites in their network that will publish it with your link. Not talking about that kind of crap. That kind of crap's going to get you a Google slap these days. Talking about real databases of journalists. So Cision Point, which is now actually owned by Willio in the UK, is the one that I'm using most now. Other ones I've experimented with, journalism.co.uk, Pressat, and Gorkana. Cision has got the biggest database, I believe. This is worth doing. I'm not saying automate everything, but once you've got your tiered contacts reached personally, you've approached them with a personal message, treating them like actual people, there's got to be a degree of scale. And obviously those of us working agency side will be acutely aware of the importance of scale. If you're working on 40 or 50 different campaigns, you've got to be able to do things in number. But even people working in-house now, the sheer quantity of content you've got to get out there and the sheer quantity of people you typically have to reach to get some success in this area now means that we've got to put a degree of scale in. With the TechMark study, we use Cision. And I mean, it's really difficult to say exactly what came from Cision, but we thought that we could attribute, the database we generated from Cision was about 500 or 600 people, and we thought that there were 30 to 40 pieces of coverage that we could attribute straight to that. It will vary based on your story, of course, but Cision does let you generate a quick database of relevant journalists, bloggers, contacts, broadcast media, whoever, and distribute quickly. Like I said, I would do that last. I'd do that after you've reached your selected contacts as a supplementary method. Paid social and content discovery. Pinterest, Twitter, Facebook, StumbleUpon. Great social platforms for winning traffic. Of course, when you're doing link acquisition, the kind of content and the kind of audience you drive is going to be absolutely key. Outbrain and Zamanta, again, we've never ever run an experiment where all we've done is one of these things, so it's difficult to attribute specific link to these specific channels. But Outbrain and Zamanta, we've seen a correlation in links with campaigns running on those. Social channels, less so, but it varies depending on the kind of content. Where we've really seen some link benefit is in PPC for content promotion, largely centered around Google AdWords for the most part. Every single time I say to a PPC guy, oh, AdWords is cheap, I get a bit of a look like that. PPC people don't like me saying AdWords is cheap, apparently. But AdWords is auction-based, so if no one's bidding, it's cheap. And typically PPC people are charged with direct response. So they're charged with getting traffic in that's going to convert, buying traffic. And then negative matching on things that indicate that someone might not buy. Things like review, statistics, free, stuff like that they negative match on. Loads of people negative matching on things, telling people that they don't want to show up for that, not only lowers the amount of competition in the market for those clicks, but actually lowers the value of the keyword to some degree. So places we've used this. Mobile statistics, nobody was bidding. So obviously we went there and we put an ad out there for a brief period of time. People searching statistics, in a lot of cases, you can make a reasonable assumption that those people are looking for some statistics because they're writing something. So you getting your statistics to them, you increase the chances of you then being linked back to as the source of statistics. So stats and research-based PPC clicks are really, really good if that's your kind of content. We've also done things like what to pack for a skiing trip, produce guide content. One's bidding, you can get clicks for pennies. Ibiza nightlife guide in June, nobody was bidding. You can get clicks for pennies. Bing's even cheaper. It's something that we've started experimenting with Bing, but the costs there seem to be cheaper. By the same token, there's much less traffic over there to be had as well. On-page SEO for your content. Where should I go on holiday? Interactive quiz that we did. Predominant goal actually was bookings and assisted bookings. Did generate some links too. Yeah, happy accident. On-page SEO, bit of keyword research, get the titles and descriptions right, make sure the content's optimized, the real back to basics SEO 101. If you're ranking for the things that your content is relevant for, people are going to find your content, links will have time. I talked about that TechMark survey at the beginning and how it's 190 referring domains to date. It goes up by about 9 or 10 a week now, and it's a year old. And that's just because for various long tail things around mobile statistics, it shows up. And as mentioned, statistics searches tend to be people looking for a source. So it lends itself well to link acquisition. So I guess the summary is that we treat content now the way we treat a product or service page. We don't just assume that people are going to find it and link to it. We're having to do more marketing around particular products and services, use more different tactics, and actually invest cash as well as just time. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stacey, for a really insightful webinar. I enjoyed it a lot, especially I found out for myself Facebook Insights. And I think I'm among those people who are clicking on those crap videos and generating those million views. I found out myself right now, because each time I see all those crap videos in my feed on Facebook, I'm just looking at that nobody is catching me and then click. I was like, oh, what the crap.
Yeah.
It's so easy to be catched by those titles. But we have some questions, and I really encourage other guys to share their questions with us. So you're very welcome. And so we have a question from Andy, and he's asking about outside of Google consumer surveys, where else you suggest buy users' data about users?
Information about users, yeah, Google Consumer Surveys is great. TalunaQuickSurveys.com. It's a bit more expensive than Google, but you do get your results back quicker. Someone else suggested actually sacking the survey thing off and trying Mechanical Turk. I've not tried that yet, for split testing headlines as well. But certainly the ones that I would go for user surveys would be quicksurveys.com, Google Consumer Surveys, or you could actually even use 5secondtest.com to split test headlines. They let you do, it's supposed to be for user testing, but they'll let you upload a picture and ask users a question. So you could upload 2 headlines and ask them which one they prefer, and you can do it that way too.
Okay, thank you very much. By the way, Twitter has recently launched polls as well, which you can use too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've not experimented with that yet, but I'd like to hear if anyone has. That'd be great.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've already started to see a lot of different polls in my feeds, and that's really interesting how it's going to be in terms of data representative. So we have another one question about tools. So do you find Gorkana and not sure it's like Cision, not sure how it's better to pronounce, and some other tools provide good media requests? The question from David.
Yeah, I mean, I love Cision Point. I mean, we don't actually always use the distribution tools, but we find their database is pretty good. I think whenever you use a database like that, especially if you're going to use their distribution, you've got to accept that you're going to get some people in a group of 500 or 600 that aren't quite as relevant as you like. It's a big database after all. But as I say, I mean, 500 or 600 users, we've been able to associate 30 to 40 pieces of coverage, most of which had links off the back of it as well. It's a pretty good turnaround for us, and it's not a bad ratio. In terms of the value that it's going to have for you, I guess it's going to depend how many pieces of content you're releasing. Obviously for us, having that, it represents value because we're saving days and days and days per month, and we're obviously distributing hundreds of pieces of content, so it does represent value. And I think the database is good with Cision. It's been a long time since I used Gorkana, so I couldn't really comment on that. And Journalisted doesn't actually have a database. It just lets you upload a press release that gets emailed to their database. So it's cheaper, but by the same token, you don't appear to reach as many people.
Okay, it's a really good scalable solution, I believe. So we have a question from Andy. And last one question from Andy, and he's asking about any other live user testing tools like Feedback Army.
As I say, 5secondtest.com. I've not used Feedback Army in particular, but 5secondtest.com I find pretty good as well. That's pretty much the only one I've used apart from Google Consumer Surveys, specifically for user feedback.
Okay. And many thanks for David Bain for joining us webinar, and he's sharing that great presentation, Stacey. So here is also
Thank you very much.
So here's a question from Tracy. So actually, it's a comment about T9 is quite good for image search, for finding link opportunities for image attribution. Used to use Google image search, but tried this recent and found out it's really handy.
Yeah, I've heard good things about T9. We've been using imageradar.com, which basically does the Google reverse image search for you. It doesn't give you many opportunities in sites that haven't placed your images yet, but it does give you email alerts when someone uses your image. I think the main issue that I have with any of the third-party tools like that I've tried is some of the false positives, but on the whole, ImageRadar has been pretty good.
Okay, and I believe right now that's the last one question. As in-house marketer, would you recommend creating our own simple infographics? Which tools are there?
Yeah, I mean, I've left I did a blog post with things like easel.ly and Pictogram, which is PIKTOGR.am. Tools like that for making infographics. I'll tweet the link actually to a post I did with a few options. I don't dislike the tools per se, but I think that they get a little bit overused just because it's easy. I think the first question is, does it need to be an infographic? I think we all default to infographic just because we think that's what we should do. If you've got the story right and it's best told in infographic format, then absolutely, you could use some tools to start experimenting. That said, people per hour, you might be able to get yourself a freelancer who could do something a little bit more custom, a little bit better for you, without spending a great deal more money. And I'd experiment before you make a decision either way. But very much depends on whether you really should be going for the infographic format or whether you could do it better in a slightly different way. Infographics can be a little bit overdone, I think.
Yes, yeah. I think I can't agree more with you, Stacey, because like sometimes I see a lot of infographics and they're really poorly performed in terms of visual side. And I think if it's really interesting data, then you can just simply present it in some graphs without just doing it like really in infographic style.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for your webinar, and I believe I'll try to collect all the tools which we were mentioning during our webinar. I'll ask Stacey as well directly, and we'll make a blog post with all those amazing tools. And so thank you very much, guys, for joining us today. So the recording of webinar will be alive shortly. We are going to send you an email about that. Thank you very much, Stacey, for a great presentation. Hopefully you are going to be back to us sometime later. Thank you very much.
Definitely. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.